Good morning. Welcome to Viewpoint, that unforgettable program. Hours. What are the hours, Mrs. Busby?
8:15 to 9. I get confused sometimes.
Oh, okay. All right. Every Wednesday morning?
Most Wednesdays, yeah.
Good,
once it happened to me on a Tuesday, but usually it's Wednesday.
Well, seriously, welcome to Viewpoint. Sheriff, if you will indulge me for a minute, I always like to come up with a kudo or two. Number one, the Lincoln Christian University Fine Arts Department just put a WAGO program on last week, several issues. It was called, that's why we brought Mr. Searby in here to talk about that, in your absence, by the way. Beauty and the Beast.
That was the day I forgot what day it was.
Beauty and the Beast. They did a great job. So I think we should give them accolades. Accolades are due. Another thing I'd like to think about, the father of our guest has, for a long time, and I guess maybe he still does, I don't know if his time allows, help our high school wrestling team out, and has been a mentor to those kids, and pretty doggone good wrestler himself in his youth. And so the gentleman, Walt Landers, not only does a good job of keeping your streets clean,
yeah.
So quit complaining about it to me. God, she's always complaining. They never pick up my sticks. Well, that's because she's always out picking up sticks, being a good citizen. Anyway, seriously, anybody that gives it their time, like the sheriff's father has done down through the years, Walt Landers has done a great job, and I just think it's appropriate to recognize. And thirdly, and finally, and I'll shut up then. Remember, I was told I talked too much.
Oh.
Yeah, got a little lady out.
Not by me, however, I hate.
Got a little lady out the congregate building says, you talk too much. You know, that Mr. Searby's a nice young man. Let him talk. So.
Okay.
The program next week is going to be a couple of ways. The cat just didn't want to go out the office, did it?
Well, I didn't have the door at the right angle for
cats.
it. Yeah, I can't manage the cat. I can't manage my dog. I got no authority.
Okay, we're going to get serious here in a minute because this is a serious subject matter this morning. Next week, two ladies, Cindy Hossiker and Margaret Williams, Moms Who Care, a very important subject matter, and they gave up their time today so we could bring the sheriff aboard to talk about a very important issue. And that will be my lead into you, Sheriff Landers. You asked to get on earlier than Judy and I had you on our calendar. We just didn't know when we were going to bring you on.
Yes, sir.
But you asked to come aboard because we have a very important election, more than just a few school board officials and so forth. So tell us about the issue that you have in mind this morning, Sheriff. Sheriff Mark Landers.
Thank you, sir. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Next week, one of the issues that will be on the ballot will be the public safety sales tax referendum. It's a referendum that will be utilized for a jail expansion at the Logan County Safety Complex. It's a half of a cent sales tax increase. It's countywide. I'd like to stress that it is a sales tax. It's not a real estate tax, so it gives us the benefit of sharing that burden with everyone who travels through our county and makes purchases. I'd also like to clarify something that's been misunderstood, is that sales tax does not apply to groceries or to prescription medication.
Oh, is that right?
That's right. So
two pretty big important items when you're out shopping.
Absolutely. So it primarily helps for the county itself to have that burden shared. The jail expansion is necessary. It's much needed, and we can go into that if you'd like here in a little bit.
I think I'd be interested in that because that's a subject we don't talk about and we don't know much about. Can you give us kind of a Reader's Digest overview of what kind of business they do at the safety complex?
Sure. So the safety complex was completed in 1978, and at the time it housed the Logan County Sheriff's Office, the Lincoln Police Department, and the Logan County Jail. What happened here in the last couple of years is the Lincoln Police Department built or remodeled a new facility and moved out of the building. I think what a lot of folks thought was that would alleviate some of our overcrowding. Lincoln Police Department is a separate entity from the Sheriff's Office. They are a policing organization for the city of Lincoln. They do not house inmates at all. That responsibility falls on the Sheriff's Office by statute. All inmates who are held in custody are held at the Logan County Jail. They're at the safety complex. And it is my responsibility statutorily for their care and their custody. The complex was originally built to hold 35 inmates. 6 of those would have been females at the time. Unfortunately, what I don't believe that folks back then understood or anticipated, I should say, is the opioid crisis that we're currently going through, the mental health crisis that not just Logan County but the country as a whole is experiencing. Mental health was defunded significantly, and they're struggling now to still get those funds back into place. But in the interim, people with mental health that are untreated or even undiagnosed, are self-medicating out there through alcohol or drugs, and then they're ended up in our facility where, in the 1970s, it was about punishment. It was about, 3 strikes and you're outlaws, things of that nature. Putting someone with a mental health issue in a correctional facility creates all kinds of its own issues. In addition to those mental health issues, we have, different populations now that we're having to handle. So I digress a little bit, but bottom line is that the facility was built to hold 35 people. We, on a daily basis, hold anywhere between 45 and 60.
Well, that's pretty much over the board, isn't it?
It is. So we've tried to accommodate by, so the cells, if I can give you a snapshot of a cell block, they were built with 4 sleeping chambers and then a day area. So at night they would go in and they would sleep in a bunk, and then in the daytime they'd be woken up, brought out of those sleeping chambers and let out into the common area, day room. We put bunk beds into those sleeping areas, so now we're putting 8 inmates into a space that was designed for 4. So you've got some overcrowding issues. You've also got some issues regarding sewer lines, water lines, toilets, things like that were designed to accommodate 4 people that are now having to work twice as hard. In the 1970s construction, sewer lines were encased in concrete, so when we have a sewer issue, we're having to break through concrete to get to those. The electrical issues that we experienced at the jail in 1970, a couple outlets would have been sufficient. They didn't have the computers, the fingerprint machines, the scanners, the security systems that we currently have and need in that facility. So a lot of upgrades are needed, but primarily the space is the issue. Coupled with that mental health issue and the addiction issue, we have no space, nor was it designed to have that area for the counseling that's necessary to start that treatment while they're incarcerated. We can go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, no, please.
Well, I was going to say we can pretty much guarantee that they're going to be drug-free when they're in our facility. So if after they've gone past that withdrawal phase, which is not a pretty sight, nor do we have a cell block for that accommodation. But once they're past that phase, we don't have areas where we can bring in addiction counselors to start that process. That's something that the expansion, the new facility, would help us with.
I was decrying to somebody about this business of our Lester's legislature legalizing marijuana. And somebody told me, now there are more than one side to anything. And this is good because that way they won't be arresting people for marijuana, and it'll free up space at the safety complex.
Well,
That would, that would, well, I'll make a couple.
Don't you know how to respond to that?
No, I do. I actually do. So here's the thing. what one generation tolerates, the next accepts. That's always been the rule, right?
I think you're right.
I don't agree with that. I know that it's coming, most likely. We are constantly getting information from the states that have legalized marijuana, and the data coming in is not good. Just 2 days ago, I read that the emergency room visits have tripled in regards to cannabis use in Colorado. So there are a significant number of issues that are going to come with that. Our problem is that right now we currently don't hold a lot of folks for marijuana cannabis charges. That's typically a citation, civil citation that's issued, and those are not the folks that we're holding in our jails. The folks that we're holding in our jails are for significant crimes, awaiting significant time, either in DOC or at the jail. Sex crimes have exploded in the last 10 to 15 years. We've seen a significant uptick in that. In line with that, we, as the sheriff, I'm mandated to protect those inmates that are housed in my facility.
Yeah.
So different populations have to be separated from other populations. That would be one population that you can't just go and place into general population because of the stigma that comes along with it. And again, these folks are, presumed innocent until after trial. So we have to house them safely and securely, and we need more space in order to do that. One of the biggest struggles that we have is the opioid crisis here in Logan County. We have overdoses. It feels like weekly, if not daily. And my issue with the cannabis problem is that, just like alcohol, it's a gateway drug. And I think once you make that more available to people, that it's going to find its way to younger people. And
That's just inevitable. You know that's going to happen.
Absolutely.
Money's involved.
Absolutely.
And where there's money involved, people who are bad people, they could care less whose kid they injure,
right,
or kill, as the case may be.
And as adults, look, you have the absolute right to choose your lifestyle, but children's brains are still developing. I know they've, the studies that I've read say up to the age of 25, if you will, Sometimes
my wife will tell you that mine's still developing.
Oh, you beat me to it, because mine said the same thing. Not about you.
Not very well at this point in time, by the way. Seriously, here we have a new sheriff in town, as the old expression goes. Just sworn in the month of January. Here we are, not even into April yet. And the first thing the poor guy does, he's got to advocate for a, quote, tax referendum. And, of course, the TAX word, immediately the antenna go up. Oh, God, I'm not paying any more taxes. Well, in fact, this is a different way of going about it. And I think we need to emphasize this very, very carefully and thoroughly, that I asked the sheriff in advance, because I knew the figure, but I forgot it. Like, my mind is developing, How much per $100 in this will this mean to a taxpayer? And again, Mark points out very, very appropriately that this tax will not be on groceries, nor will it be on medications. And it's two very important big items. The per capita tax, and Mark tells me that it's figured on the charts that the average taxpayer will pay 50 cents per $100.
That's
now
correct.
Stop and think about that, folks. For the safety of the Golden County citizens, 50 cents on $100 worth of purchases. Excuse me, by the way, that includes people who are transient coming through from Chicago to Cairo, stop and get a bite to eat and some gasoline. They'll pay that tax.
That's exactly right. And, the biggest thing that I talk about and stress is that the last thing in the world that I want to do is ask for taxes, is ask for more. I live here. I'm affected just as well as everyone
Right.
else. But the sales tax I believe, is the fairest way to do this. It's a much-needed infrastructure improvement for Logan County. We've outgrown the capacity of our current facility. Housing inmates outside of the county is cost prohibitive. There are actually counties that have a revenue stream coming into their county by housing inmates for other institutions. So that's something we don't want to be the people that are paying other counties to house our inmates.
Right.
But what I see every year, we have a lot of tourism into Logan County. We have a lot of sporting events. I remember last year where there was an event in Springfield, a motorcycle rally, and every hotel here was filled up with folks that were staying and going and attending this event in Springfield. Mm-hmm. So you know they're eating here, you know they're staying here. Mm-hmm. Those folks would help relieve that burden from the Logan County residents. The sporting events, the large soccer tournaments, the basketball tournaments, all these folks that are coming in here to Lincoln and Logan County would be helping us to pay for that jail expansion.
Mm-hmm.
Two of the biggest necessities, as I emphasized a minute ago, groceries and medications. That would represent a very significant part of a person's expenditures over a period of a month's period. And the fact is that those are not being taxed. So in essence, we're taxing ourselves by the way we spend our own money.
Right, and I think that was one of the reasons for that, is that those folks that are on fixed incomes, this would have less of an impact on them, because those are vital things that they need to buy every week or month. So those aren't going to be taxed. It's the extra stuff, if you go out to eat, things of that nature. So.
You've said that you had been speaking to various groups about how this will work. And what has been the feeling that you've gotten from these various groups once they come to understand what in the heck we're talking about? I
think it's been positive. I think once folks realize, a significant number of people didn't understand or know how our inmate population had grown here in Logan County, that there are last week we were at capacity and we were wondering where we were going to shovel people. When you have co-defendants that have to be separated, or we get more females than we're able to accommodate, and we have to move males to accommodate females in cells, they have to be segregated. You
can't just send out a bulletin saying all females behave because we don't have any more room.
No more coming to jail. We're going to have that. No, and then it becomes the issue, and this is where I stress it, because folks, there's been two minds. Well, they're in jail. It's supposed to not be a nice place. It's supposed to be uncomfortable. It's supposed to be a deterrent. And that's true. We're not looking to make it a playground area. But what we are looking to do is that the facility that we have is very linear and non-observable in structure. So what that means is that the cell blocks are down long corridors. They're separated by steel doors. There's no direct observation available for correctional staff. There's no direct sunlight. So all that stuff's like, oh, we're just wanting to make it a Disneyland for these people. No, all of that affects behavior. So so you're already overpopulating the cell blocks, and then you have no direct observation by correctional staff. So something that could just start as a verbal argument can escalate very quickly without direct observation. Mm-hmm. Whereas if we had that type of facility, they could intervene quicker and maybe stop some of those inmate-on-inmate batteries. And then once that escalates, now they're agitated, and now there's a danger directly to my staff. Here's the one thing that I struggle with, is that my staffing levels have not, while the inmate population has more than doubled, my staffing has not increased at all. So what I'm trying to do is fix that, and at the same time make this jail a safer place for not just the inmates, but for my staff as well.
Right.
Go ahead.
Well, the thing is, if they aren't all cared for the way the book says they have to be, I'm sure that the Sheriff's Department of Logan County would be punished.
Absolutely. Here's the thing, is that not everyone that comes through that jail is a career criminal. And that's just the truth of the matter. Folks make mistakes. There are people that come into my jail and they stay for a brief period of time, anywhere from 3 days to a month to maybe longer. But sometimes people just make mistakes, and there's that punishment for it. But we are ultimately responsible for their care and custody. And it's me individually as a sheriff, I'm mandated by statute, but the people of Logan County are the ones that support that, and we're the ones that would be held responsible overall as a county should something happen to, say, an inmate who, that's how it works. That's just unfortunate.
Speaking of responsibility, Sheriff, we have a big one here to our sponsors, and that is we have to give them a little time because they give us money. So right ahead, Mr. Reich, to acknowledge our sponsors today. Right back live in our studios here, WLCN. Our guest this morning on Viewpoint, new kid on the block, so to speak, and we're sure as heck have him in the neighborhood, as Mr. Rogers says.
Yes.
Sheriff Mark Landers, whose family is.
How long have you been with the Sheriff's Department?
I'm with the Sheriff's Office for 20 years, going on 20 years here. So I was with Atlanta Police Department for 7 years, and then in the law enforcement community in the Army for another couple. So I'm in 25 years now in law enforcement.
You've been down this road a while.
A couple times.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you that very profound question. I got stepped on. So.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Well, be careful. We have to have our signals. Mr. Ashton, were we successful in coming up with a wedding? You're working on that. We have one of our two listeners has posed a question. What is the wording on this ballot that's coming up? That will be next Tuesday. And we're going to try to find that answer so we can be very specific and answer that. Okay. I'll let Sheriff Landers read this query.
So the actual wording, the proposition to establish public safety sales tax to pay for public safety purposes shall the County of Logan, Illinois be authorized to impose an increase of a share of local sales tax by, it looks like 0.5%, which is the half a cent. Half a penny is what that's how it has to read by statute. I know it's a little confusing, but that's the actual wording that has to be on there.
The bottom line again is I want to emphasize two things on this tax discussion this morning. The biggest part of our customers' outflow of cash would be groceries and unfortunately medications. Those are exempt from this tax, and one of the really important things I want to make sure that the voters understand is that at the end of the day, if they spend $100, 50 cents of that will be attributed to this new tax that we're trying to enact.
That's correct. And the sales tax,
I think that's very important for the people to understand. 50 cents on $100.
Yes, sir. And just to clarify, that sales tax has to be used for public safety. I mean, that's its intent.
That's just not going into the general fund.
Correct. That's correct. So that's been asked of me a couple of times, and as I've been informed, that's where the money has to be utilized. It's not something that's just going to go into a general fund and then be used for some other purpose.
And if you don't abide by all the rules and regulations that are set forth for the housing of people, every once in a while you read about some county having been their socks sewed off because some inmate didn't appreciate the accommodations. And that gets pricey.
Very true. Very true. And that's what every day my staff goes in there and does the very best job that they can do. And the facility, again, is aging, it's overcrowded, and it's become a safety issue for them and for...
That's really interesting, Sheriff. There's a lot of fellow running around my age, and we remember when that new facility was built. It seemed like just yesterday, and here we are now with a facility that's not adequate to today's times. And it isn't that long ago we built that.
So on that note, here's the great part about this expansion. We did look at a new facility. That cost came in at $16-17 million, which would have been cost prohibitive. So folks have asked me, how much for the new structure? How much is it going to cost?
Yeah.
We brought in Dewberry Architects to come and give us some versions of what the expansion and the new construction could look like. So the new facility would be built right off the existing structure. We'd go off of the Sallyport to the south into that green space that's on the Broadway Street side. The new construction would include two 32-bed pods of about 6 inmates per pod with direct observation. The benefit of this expansion is that it also leaves room for future expansion. Part of the addition will be blocked in and part of the existing structure, but won't be completed because of cost. But 30 years from now, if Logan County finds itself in this exact same situation, we have the ability to add an additional 32 pods into that structure, which saves, we're not having to come back and ask the taxpayers for additional funding for that.
I would vouchsafe to say, Sheriff, that it's almost inevitable it will be an addition long before the 30-year period comes around.
Right.
I would just guess that.
At our current growth rate, it's possible. What we are able to do, though, with the addition is take that, the original site, it stays in place. We take that back down to what it was intended for, back down to the 35 inmates, and then you relieve the strain on the utilities and on the sewer lines and that stuff back to its original. We use that as overflow. We use the new facility for housing of current inmates, and it really does solve a myriad of issues.
So you point out a very specific item, this new tax, and I'm not going to say if it's successful. It's just really terribly important we make this referendum a yes vote next Tuesday. That money is to be set, not unlike the gas tax years ago. So they're going to fix the hard roads, as they called them. They got harder, and they didn't get fixed. The gas money just got swallowed up in various other issues by our esteemed legislators. I'll accept Tim Butler from that remark. I think he gives us a better bang for our buck than most of them down there. But it's important for us to know that the referendum, the money will be spent just for this purpose alone.
For public safety, absolutely.
For public safety.
Yep. And that's the thing that I would argue is that the public safety is the one feature in any community that has to be funded. We don't have any control over the number of inmates that come into our facility. It really is based on behavior, and it's based on law enforcement response to that. So the population itself dictates how many folks are in our facility. So we do the best we can with what we have right now, but it's very important. And like I said, just as recently as 2 months ago, we were having to house a couple of inmates in a neighboring jurisdiction.
That cost us big time money.
Well, fortunately, I have a relationship with that sheriff, and we can do that a couple of times, but it's not something that we want to make a habit of doing, and it's not something that's feasible financially or for our responsibility.
Well, eventually that would eat up your budget pretty quickly, I
Yes,
suspect.
ma'am.
And you don't seem to be banking on a vast drop in criminal activity in the world.
No, our population has stayed pretty consistent, and if anything, fluctuates up more than down.
You raised a question. I may have listened through the answer. I'm not certain. How do we rack up with, say, Sangamon County, Macon County, Fulton County, for that matter, in relationship to population in our prisons?
So it's funny that those other jails, Sangamon County, Macon County, much larger than us, larger population base.
Sure.
They're able to hold more. But when you look at counties that are our size, it's the counties that are situated along interstates that seem to be at capacity. If you get into some of these more rural counties that may even be a similar size, their populations are much less. I don't know what it is, but the Department of Corrections inspectors have told us that's throughout the state. Along interstate corridors, your jails are just, and we sit in a position, Lincoln's a wonderful community, Logan County is a wonderful county, but we sit right in the middle of some major thoroughfares between Bloomington and Springfield and Peoria and Decatur. So the roadways that lead through Logan County are major drug funnels for those areas, and unfortunately, it's clearly drugs are coming here for a reason. So they don't come here for none. There's a need.
The reason is money. Money, honey, that's the reason.
Right. And there's clearly a demand. So we have to, criminal justice reform, people talk about that like we need to fix the just that portion of it. Criminal justice reform also comes to how do we get people to change their mindset, the addiction issue, and address that. And we've tried here in Logan County. I believe we've done a very good job with drug court. Now the circuit's established veterans court, where you take folks that are offenders that have drug or alcohol issues, and you defer them not to jail or to prison, but to a program that gives them much more oversight, much more frequent, drug screening.
Trying to get them to see the light.
Trying to get them redirected back onto a path that makes them a productive citizen.
648-5510. Mrs. Busby and I make a habit of forgetting to emphasize that number enough. The caller a while ago had to call in with their own question, unasked. So we apologize for not reminding our listeners, all three of them out there, that
it's expanded.
I just found out another one. The fact that we have our phone service available must be emphasized, because there are people out there who may have a question about this so-called referendum. And it is not so-called. That's exactly what it is. And again, Sheriff, I want to get back, and Judith K., I think it's very important for the voters out there to understand the impact, the potential impact on them. 50 cents on $100 spent. Now that's pretty minuscule to get the kind of service we need for our Logan County jail, for want of a better word, and that's exactly what we're talking about. I left you deep in the subject, didn't I?
Yes.
Why don't I throw you a rope?
Yeah, okay. Would it be productive to talk a little bit about this drug court? Is this something that's popping up around the state, or is it something that Logan County birthed?
No, it's mandated by the state. Logan County has one. Every county has one, and ours is active and it's operational. I don't have the current numbers of how many folks are in that right now, but it one of the counselors that is a friend of mine that is on that has, we've talked in the past about, and we've had some pretty heated debates, I'll say that, about the difference. And I do come from 25 years of law enforcement, and I have a very different way, I guess, of looking at that, at drug addiction. But, after this long, I recognize the fact that these folks that come through our jails are going to come back out into our neighborhoods. They're not going to stay in jail forever. And we have to recognize that if we can give some benefit, we can give some counseling, we can maybe put them on the right track while they're staying with us, then maybe, even if it's only one that changes their life, then maybe when they get back out, they become a productive member of your neighborhood, of your community, and they go on to do some other good, as opposed to, coming back into my facility.
Well, we as a society have to have that hope that things can be redeemed, and people can be redeemed.
And that, unfortunately, is pretty expensive. That's just the way the way it is in the neighborhood.
Yeah,
it's very, very important that we understand these aren't wish lists that we're talking about. This is not Never Never Land out there. This is the real world. And you have to deal every day when you walk into that courthouse or over at the safety complex. You're dealing in the real world, not say, gee, I wish.
Well, that's what I've clarified to a few people that I've spoken to, is that, these are not wants, these are definite needs for the county and the sheriff's office itself.
All right, I have a very direct question, Sheriff.
All right.
How much money do you anticipate being generated each year by the sales tax increase? That's a pretty tough, that's pretty direct, listener. We appreciate your question. Then we'll have a follow-up question then.
Sure. The folks that have, the financial people that have talked about this tax, obviously it will fluctuate based on the amount of money that's spent in Logan County,
Right.
but I've been told that it can raise upwards of $800,000 to $900,000 per year, depending.
Now, if this is successful, I'm going to try to eliminate the word if, or when this is successful. We'll take the positive approach. Construction start pretty quickly. How will you start the ball rolling on that?
So from start to finish a project, what Dewberry Architects said would be probably around 16 months. They'll have to go out for site design and bring the architects in and do site
All the
development.
preliminary work that needs to be done.
Yes, sir.
So it would be safe to say that by midsummer we'd have this ball rolling?
I believe so, yes, sir.
I hope that answers the caller's question. I appreciate the fact they take time to call in.
Why don't you give the number again? Because
648-5510.
to call in would be better, because if it raises another question in your mind, you can go ahead and ask. The sheriff would be happy to answer them.
648-5510. We appreciate your calls. This is a really highly sophisticated office. We get the question, and Mr. Ice just types it up for me and hands it to me. This is smooth operation. What kind of negative response have you had, Sheriff? Not going to raise my taxes again, by God.
Primarily the tax issue, yep. And then the other issue was, well, it's jail. It's not supposed to be nice. It's not supposed to be fun, and all that's true, but the bottom line is that we have to remember that, we have sentenced inmates and we have non-sentenced inmates. So those folks who are non-sentenced are awaiting trial. So there's probable cause to hold them. They have bonds that have been set, but they've not been.
But they're still innocent.
But they've not been
until.
adjudicated yet.
Yes.
So we have to keep that part in mind. And again, like I said, while we do have our share of violent offenders and those who commit some pretty heinous crimes, we also have a number of individuals who, simply made a mistake, and have to do that part of their sentence in our facility. So it's my job by statute to make sure that everybody in that facility is kept safe.
Safety is the word there. Excuse me, Judith K. Just a minute, if I may, please, honey. You mentioned the line of view, physically, a line of view down so that you can observe what's going on in your corridor. That's a very important thing, and you don't have the luxury of that right now.
No, the facility that we have was constructed in the 70s, and that was how correctional facilities were just built.
Yeah.
Long linear block and metal corridors without direct observation by correctional staff. American Corrections Academy Association has, shown that direct observation by correctional staff helps to alleviate some of those conflicts, kind of keeps some of those issues in check by being able to respond faster, seeing those, like I said earlier, before they escalate into something more.
Sure. Well, I think we all behave well when we know we're being watched,
Right.
I'm that way at home.
Are you that way?
Be very careful in my house.
Okay. But you're being received well as you speak to organizations
Yes, ma'am.
about the problem that we face.
Right.
And there isn't any happy ever after until you address it.
Right. The issue's not going away.
No.
The can's been kicked down the road for far too long, and unfortunately, or fortunately, either way you want to look at it, it's mine to wrestle with. It's mine to deal with, and it has to be addressed. There's no other options available to us now. So
You can't just put signs on the highway that say, "We in this community do not countenance sinning. And please observe this rule we have.
Right, and you folks know better than most, Lincoln has changed over the past 40 years. Behavior has changed, what's accepted has changed. And honestly, Logan County, I kid you not, it just feels like if something's going to happen, regardless of where it starts, it's going to end up here in Logan County. And it's one of the things that we wrestle with. So if you've read or kept up with, current events here locally, we've had some significant events that have occurred in our community, and we just have to be able to respond appropriately with the appropriate training and gear, and then be able to house these individuals properly. And I don't have a choice in that matter. All of that is mandated. I have the Department of Corrections. The Illinois Department of Corrections actually oversees the jail, and they have a set of mandates of their own that follow statute, and there's no leeway on that. We have several federal and state laws that have taken effect that we're required to follow. And like you said earlier, by not following or by issues that arise out of some of those issues, the potential for monetary damage to us as a county is, could be significant.
I'm going to elucidate on a rather personal opinion, if I may, Mrs. Busby and
yeah.
Mr. Ash. It's my judgment, for whatever that's worth, that we've been lucky down through the years to have some pretty doggone good sheriffs. Just historically, you take every 4 years, we come up with a good sheriff, whether you keep the incumbent or turn the rascal out. How did you find, do you have anything blindsided you? I'll just ask you a long question. I'm going to withdraw it. Because what I was going to ask the sheriff is if he got blindsided, anything new that he didn't realize was going on before he became sheriff. But he worked under a good sheriff, and they had good communication, so I doubt that was the case. Sheriff, go right ahead and sum up with, if you will, please, why we brought Mark Landers aboard.
So, on April 2nd, the public safety sales tax referendum will be on the ballot. I'm asking for your support and for a yes vote. It's a half a cent to expand. It's for every $100 spent, it's 50 cents, and it does not apply to groceries or to prescription medication. It's the fairest way, in my opinion, for this expansion to be built, because it shares the burden, not with just Logan County residents through, say, something like a property tax, but it's a sales tax. Everybody that spends money here in Logan County, whether they're from here or not, will help us with that construction.
And you can't just ignore the fact
it's not going away.
of this need.
No, we can't stick our head in the ground and say, oh my, maybe this will pass.
Yeah.
We can't be like the ostrich. Sheriff Mark Landers, we appreciate you taking your time today. We're glad. We appreciate the ladies, Mrs. Oscar and Mrs. Williams, for graciously yielding their time today, which we had assigned them. And we thank you, ladies, for that. It's very important. So on behalf of Sheriff Mark Landers, and more importantly, all of the citizenry, vote for this referendum next Tuesday. Thank you, Mark Landers.
Thank you.